Afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Delaware Public Service Commission meeting of March 27th, 2018, also known as the Bob Howitt Commission Day. Bob is in his last meeting with us today, and he's going to go into retirement. And of course, as Bob has a lot of experience in utility regulation and also a lot of experience in retirement. This is going to be his fourth retirement. So we're going to have a very subdued party because he's probably going to be back before us soon. And I guess it's a good day for returners because it's a pleasure to see that Andrea Kreiner is here. She's back for the state of Delaware. Welcome back. I know you know this, but one of the things that we do pride ourselves on is our relationship with DNREC. We have a good working relationship with DNREC, and Tom Noyes is here quite often, as is Rob Underwood and other people from the department. So welcome, Andrea. I hope this is one of many meetings you can make. Any way we can help, let us know, except we can't do anything about our votes. Also, it's a special day because we have a new employee, Lacey Hutchinson, over here to my left. She's been here for a couple weeks now. She's one of our administrative specialists, and she's going to be a big help to us. And we want everyone to say hello and thank you and welcome aboard. And I hope you enjoy your service with the Delaware Public Service Commission. And we have some reading of the meeting minutes of March 13th, 2018. Anyone want to make any corrections or changes to the minutes? May we have a motion?
I move that we adopt the minutes March 13.
Second the motion?
All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I abstain.
I abstain.
The consent agenda, is there any matter on the consent agenda that any commissioner would like to have taken off the consent agenda?
Mr. Chairman, the second item on the consent agenda about the QFCP tariffs, I have a few questions, so I would like to have that taken off.
Okay, number 2 will be taken off and placed on the regular agenda as number 5. May we have a motion with respect to the remaining item on the consent agenda?
Move that we adopt item number 1 on the consent agenda as presented.
And I second.
Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Are there any opposed or any abstentions? The motion carries. Number 1 on the regular agenda is in the matter of the adoption of rules and procedures to implement the Renewable Energy Portfolio Standards Act. And we're here to consider the proposed order number 9197. I see all of the parties are coming forward. And of course, Ms. Iori is already forward.
I am very forward. I'll second that.
Okay, well, it's my understanding that this matter is not on the calendar for a hearing. So those of you who came ready with a prepared speech, I want to disappoint you all. So it's my understanding that the commission will either approve the proposed order number 9197, or in the alternative, set this matter for a hearing where we could hear from the parties with respect to the legal issues. Now, I saw that there were quite a few public comments that came in, so I want to express my appreciation to the members of the public who responded, as well as the parties who participated and provided some additional thought and effort with respect to the legal issues. And Mr. Willard is our attorney, is the commission today. And Mr. Willard, I have a question for you to start this thing off. Is it your legal opinion that the legal positions taken by the parties present some substantial legal reasoning that might be contrary to what the Public Service Commission ruled on the last time we had this matter before us.
Yes, it is quite possible. If the commissioners feel that some change is necessary, you certainly have that power.
Thank you, Mr. Willard. I do want to make one slight criticism of one of the parties. First of all, I want to thank him. Mr. Myers, thank you so much for all your effort and all your work. But I am going to be a little bit critical of your brief. You made the comment about the football metaphor. Well, I think that was a little bit, you're a little bit off base on that comment, because it was after the Sweet 16 and just after the Elite Eight and before the Final Four. You're using a football metaphor, however, having said that, Mr. Myers, in your brief, I don't think you threw us any curveballs. So I think that what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a motion to put this issue on deck so that the people at the mound here can decide what they want to do with respect to the issues that you all have been discussing. So the motion I'll make is that this matter, Regulation 56, be scheduled for a hearing wherein the parties can make additional oral arguments with respect to this proposed regulation. And that obviously the commission would then consider that argument and make a decision with respect to the proposed regulations. Now, I put that on the table for consideration of all the commissioners, not knowing obviously what their thoughts are on this, but this is one way I decided would be a good way to get this thing resolved. Is there anyone that makes any, is there a second to the motion, first of all?
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion on the motion? Commissioner Gray.
So, Mr. Chair, I guess as I'm looking at the historical record as well as the path forward here, you're suggesting that stakeholders come into the commission and express their points of view such that we can reconsider what we've already decided?
My intent is that the parties to this action be permitted to make additional comments, not prolonged, but short oral arguments with respect to the issues, and that the commission could then affirm what it previously ruled, or they could make any appropriate changes if they were satisfied that the legal arguments are such that one of the decisions we made was not correct.
Okay, so the only clarification I'm looking for is parties implies those who already have been in front of the commission. It's not a very open public access for additional comments to come in.
That's exactly right. However, today and before today, the public was notified and given the opportunity to provide public comments, and I read, it seemed to me, approximately 100 comments I read from individuals up and down this state. So I think that the public has had the opportunity to make their public comments.
Okay, I am clear. Thank you. No further questions.
I have a question. Mr. Commissioner, will this hearing be specific to the 3 items that are listed in Mr. DeLosa's memorandum?
I don't believe we can make a limitation. It would concentrate on those 3 issues. But there might be some, for example, I think that Mr. Myers has advocated some, and I think maybe the public advocate has advocated some language changes, and I think that Ms. Scott and Denrick has advocated some changes. So I don't think we need to horse collar ourselves tightly. I think we need to address I think we have the right to address the entire written regulation.
Thank you.
It seems to me that there's silence has overcome us up here at the podium, so I think that's a sign that everyone's made the comments that they wish to make with respect to this. So I'll call the question. All those who are in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Are there any abstentions? The motion carries. Okay, number 2 on the calendar is in the matter of the application of Delaware.
Chairman Winslow,
Chair.
if I may interrupt just one second, please.
Absolutely.
There is an order on the agenda That is proposed order number 9197. I believe, although I'll defer to your counsel, that you may want to take an action on that order because it is on the agenda.
And point of clarification,
Yes, Ms. Eilers.
if the commission just voted to hear additional argument from the parties,
I think that, yes, that's correct.
when will that be?
I would think it's going to be the next duly scheduled meeting.
I am unable to make both meetings in the month of April due to previously scheduled commitments.
I'd
And I
forgotten about that.
really don't want this to take any longer than it already has. With the commission's indulgence, would the commission be willing to hear arguments today? The parties are here, and I think the parties are probably prepared.
Well, I think that's a good recommendation. Speaking for myself, I don't think that would be the optimum unless we had some time after today in order to consider those statements and read the documents, et cetera. I'm not in a position where I feel comfortable making a ruling on it today.
Chair Winslow, may I comment on that?
Absolutely.
If it were argument today, it would need to be noticed 20 days as a hearing. In fairness to all parties, those are the rules. I appreciate Ms. Iwari's vacation schedule. This couldn't be heard any earlier than the April 24th.
And I will
hearing.
not be here on April
Yeah, I
24th
understand that.
either.
Yeah, I understand that. And I,
Well,
just referencing the fact that the first April hearing wouldn't allow the proper 20 days notice. So the second is out, and today just does not mesh with the rules. So
And that is correct. You can't do it for April 12th. You could do it for April 24th, or if you want to honor Ms. Regina, put it into May.
Ms. Iori,
Well, then we
When
have a
you-
problem with, with Mr. Myers.
Ms. Iori, when you first brought that up, we were very cognizant of that, and I'd forgotten about that particular fact. I would like to see this put off until May, and if Mr. Myers can, perhaps he can call in from out there in the west. I would just suggest to Mr. Myers that he has already written a very brief, concise, to the point, brief, and I'm not sure what more he wants to say. I believe he has some documents he wants presented with respect to part of the issue, and I think that, how would you be able to do that if you weren't here?
I'll leave them here, they're up against the wall.
Well, why don't we do it this way? Why don't you tell us what you want to tell us with respect to that issue today? It's not noticed, so we'll have to repeat, we'll have to put that on, have maybe Ms. Iori or Mr. Stevenson can put that on the record for you in terms of entering the exhibits when we have the opportunity to do so in early May.
Okay. What I proposed to do today was, in effect, I constructed two charts to try to show what the cost of compliance were for the 2016-17 compliance year, which was the last full year. I have a handout that reflects those numbers, but they're on the chart behind you. And under my calculations, based on some figures lifted from DP&L's RPS report, and some estimated numbers based on last year's DENREC report, I just came up with the numbers and the conclusion that both the solar and the overall cost caps of the 1% and 3% have both been breached for the third or fourth consecutive year. And the overall doesn't include any of the Bloom Energy charges, the $30 million that was paid for that. So it's up at around 4.7%, excluding $30 million of Bloom surcharges that the commission last year said should have been included. That was my point.
Mr. Myers, have you talked to all the other parties, and are they aware of these facts and figures?
I
And
circulated an email with the numbers and indicated I'd present those exhibits last week.
are there any objections to the admission of the documents of Mr.
I've got a
Myers?
smaller copy here.
that Mr. Myers has referred to?
May I please ask a question?
Absolutely.
I have the perspective that there are some issues with regard to the decision made by the commission, which, if I recall correctly, had to do with the inclusion of the Bloom calculations, which had to do with definitions. This information, to me, sounds more like statistical quantifying how close to or in excess of a threshold we have gotten. So I'm concerned a little bit about the scope of what we're entertaining or accepting into the record, and what we're trying to achieve with the additional hearings. I thought that there were some objections to the authorities and some objections with regard to the decisions made already. These look more to me like I'd like to show that we are either at or in excess of a threshold, which for me is a different scope of conversation.
Mr. Myers?
Well, I think that's absolutely correct. The point is that even without the Bloom charges, it's over. It's been consistently over, and that's inconsistent with my interpretation of the, that I've offered to the commission about what happens when you're over.
Okay, so if one discussion is about the rules for determining when and if we're over, is what's at issue and within scope of what we've agreed to hear, then in my view, whether we're over or not, and the calculation that proves that is a completely different scope of hearing, conversation, and evidence.
Mr. Myers?
That's absolutely right.
Okay. Mr. Walsh?
Thank you, Chair Winslow and Commissioners. On behalf of staff, I would object to allowing both the testimony and the exhibits. There is no opportunity to do our due diligence as to those numbers. Certainly, I'm not going to cross-examine Mr. Myers on these, and I think while I know the rules of evidence are relaxed, I think with an issue as big as this, there ought to be some sort of evidentiary foundation required, at least in terms of the source of the numbers. And we don't have that, nor can it, in my opinion, occur today, just due to the fact that this is not a noticed hearing. So we would object to both the testimony and the exhibits.
Are there any other comments on the admissibility of this proposed exhibit? Ms. Scott?
Chair Winslow, I would also object to this exhibit being entered at this time. As for today, Denrick is not prepared to comment on Mr. Myers' exhibit, but it seems to me that at this juncture, it's premature. The regulations haven't been promulgated yet, and one of the key issues for Denrick is Denrick's authority in the freeze determination.
Thank you. Mr. Stevenson?
No, I don't have any comments on Mr. Myers' submission. My only concern is we need to make this calculation. I'm not sure that the current plan to continue delaying is in the best interest of the ratepayers.
Thank you. The document will not be admitted into evidence. Anything further?
Chair
Ms.
Winslow,
Scott?
I know that you recognized Ms. Kreiner earlier, but I just wanted to formally introduce her to the commission. It's Andrea Kreiner, and she is the new division director for Denrick's Division of Energy and Climate.
Thank you. As I said, welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Number,
Mr., you do still have the order pending. I think you need to vote to do something with it.
okay, what are you proposing I do to it?
Well, I think you're, if I
I
understand
vote
you
for approving
correctly,
it so we can start the appeal process.
you want to put off the order for this hearing and say, we're not going to confirm this order, and there will be a new order at a following hearing.
Okay, there's going to be a new order for the next hearing?
It may be the same order, but I mean, you're not going to act on the order today, so I think you can vote not to pass this order today.
Table it.
I thought that was, yes, I thought that was, obviously, I didn't make it as clear as I should have, but I thought that was, the import of the motion was to put the proposed regulation off further, so we have further input, and then make a decision on it in May upon Ms. Iori's return. Is that comport with all the people who voted on it? I see some heads shaking yes.
If it doesn't, that's what I support.
So I think that's the answer to the question.
Chair Winslow, I need one clarification. You said that the document, I assume the chart there would not be admitted into evidence. There's a crossover between Mr. Meyer's testimony and his reference to that chart. Is any part of his testimony being allowed? Because I would object on the same basis.
I don't think he was sworn in as a witness, and I didn't hear any testimony. I heard that he wanted to introduce a chart as evidence, and that's been turned down, so there's no evidence in the record that I'm aware of with respect to the chart. There was just argument made by Mr. Myers.
And is that argument going to be allowed for the commission's consideration?
Well, we didn't admit the piece of evidence, so I don't think that the underlying discussion concerning the piece of evidence would be at all relevant to our discussion.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that it was not accepted into the record for consideration.
Correct. Mr. Myers?
Now you got my dander up.
Uh-oh.
It's a rulemaking proceeding. If you read the statute, it says information, briefs, or other data presented by a party. Doesn't have to clear any evidentiary threshold. I circulated this, well, the backstory is, I asked staff to try to get these numbers to do this for this year, and they refused. So I, in effect, calculated these numbers on an estimate, which clearly reflected in the chart behind you, and presented it just as an exemplar. If you want to know the numbers, let's get the numbers for last year. And you can phrase them any way you want, you can apply them any way you want, but it would seem very helpful to me for the commission to know what the range of percentages would be when they're talking about how they're going to interpret the statute.
Well, I've made a decision. I think I'm going to stick with the decision, Mr. Myers, and I appreciate your comment, but I've considered it not relevant to the language of the proposed rule. How the exact math comes out, I don't believe is something that's set forth for us to consider. In other words, I don't think we're here to determine an outcome. I understand that there's an outcome, but I don't think we need to consider that. Okay. Number 2, excuse me. This is in the matter of the application of Delmarva Power and Lake Company, Exelon Corporation, Pepco Holdings, Purple Acquisition Corporation, Exelon Energy Delivery Company. For certain approvals, it's the arrearage management plan. So we'll have Delmarva kick this one off.
Good afternoon, Chair Winslow and Commissioners. My name is Lindsay Orr. I'm with Delmarva Power, and with me is Heather Hall, the Manager of Regulatory Affairs for Delmarva Power. If I may, I'd just like to provide a little bit of background about this application. This is not a new proposal. While the application was filed August 31st, 2017, the issue of the arrearage management plan dates back to the merger between Exelon and Pepco Holdings. On April 7th, 2015, the parties to the merger entered into an amended settlement agreement. The amended settlement agreement included a most favored nation provision, pursuant to which the joint applicants agreed to provide additional benefits in Delaware if greater financial or non-financial benefits were ordered or agreed to by the joint applicants in connection with the merger in other jurisdictions. On October 18th, 2016, this commission entered order number 8952 in this docket, ordering that the adoption of certain non-financial conditions listed in an Exhibit A to that order would provide Delmarva Power ratepayers with comparable benefits and protections with respect to the merger as were ordered by PHI's other state regulatory jurisdictions. Among the non-financial conditions approved by the Commission in that order was an arrearage management program, which would be developed jointly by Delmarva Power, staff, DPA, and other interested stakeholders to assist low-income customers with eliminating their past due utility bills. Any agreement regarding the adoption of an arrearage management program would be submitted to the Commission for review and approval. On November 1st, 2016, the Commission entered order number 8970 in this docket, allocating the most favored nation financial benefit to several different programs. As part of this order, the Commission allocated over $3 million to the arrearage management program, specifically finding such program to be in the public interest. Working group meetings were then held between Delmarva Power, staff, DPA, Catholic Charities, Inc., the Delaware Department of Health and Social Services, the Division of State Service Centers, Stand By Me, the Sustainable Energy Utility, the Latin American Community Center, and First State Community Action Association. Agreement was reached as to the parameters of an arrearage management program as outlined in the application and summarized in staff's memo. Delmarva Power submitted a letter to the Commission on March 8, 2018, amending the enrollment timeline and reducing the anticipated costs of the program that it would seek to recover. A copy of the letter was sent to all members of the working group requesting any comment on the application or the contents of the letter. No comments were received. It is my understanding that staff and DPA support approval of staff's proposed order. Accordingly, Delmarva Power respectfully requests the Commission enter staff's proposed order number 9198.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Walsh?
Thank you, Chair Winslow, Commissioners. Staff did review the application, and I will not repeat what Ms. Orr recited. That is accurate on all accounts. We worked with the parties on crafting this consensual order, and staff supports the entry of the proposed order 9198.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Ms. Iori?
Thank you, Chair Winslow and Commissioners. The Public Advocate supports the entry of order number 9198.
Thank you. Any questions, Commissioners?
Move we adopt order number 9198 as presented. I second it.
Is there any discussion on the motion to approve proposed order number 9198? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Orr.
Thank you.
Mr. Walsh. Number 3 is in the matter of the application of Artesian Water Company regarding the Slaughter Beach Water Company for approval of an asset purchase agreement. It will be proposed order number 9201. Welcome, Mr. Spade.
Good afternoon. I'm here before you. Let me back up by first of all saying I deeply appreciate the indulgence of staff in this matter. They did yeoman's work pulling together paperwork to have this matter come before you today. That's number one. This is a last-minute application for the purchase of the assets of Slaughter Beach Water Company. The owner of Slaughter Beach, at a rather quick pace, decided he was no longer interested in running the company any longer. It is a company run by one man. His wife did the books. His wife is no longer capable of doing those jobs and responsibilities, and therefore he was not interested in continuing. So this is a rather rushed affair here. We came to agreement, signed a purchase agreement in early March, and we are before you today to seek approval for that purchase of those assets and transfer of the CPCN to Artesian. Again, I've read the staff's memo, the order, agree with both, and seek your approval for that, that asset transfer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spade. Mr. Willard?
Yes, as Mr. Spate said, also, it should be pointed out, it's my understanding there'll be no change in the customer's rates, et cetera, at the time being.
Correct.
Once Artesian takes over completely at their next rate, they will come in with the proper rate for these individuals. Is that right?
But let me just add that, as Connie correctly pointed out in her memo, they do not have meters right now. There's 2 commercial customers, but we won't change any of the tariff rates until we're able to install meters and they are metered customers. So that would be the threshold, then we come back to you with a proper application for that change.
Anything further, Mr. Willard?
No, thanks.
Ms. Iworry?
Thank you, Chair Winslow and Commissioners. The Public Advocate appreciates being able to review the proposed order. We added a paragraph that neither staff nor Artesian objected to, just making clear that no rate-making treatment of the acquisition price or regarding any of the assets was being approved as a result of the commission approving the purchase by Artesian of Slaughter Beach. And with that inclusion, the Public Advocate supports the proposed acquisition.
Thank you, Ms. Iworry. Mr. Walsh, you were making I have a question for us.
Thank you, Chair Winslow and Commissioners. I just.
Who do you represent, first of all?
Well, just,
Us?
the Commission,
Okay.
I ask that you consider one item that frankly, I was not clear on, and I don't want to throw a wrench in the works here, but I know this is a 215 sale, and if they're going to start operating the Slaughter Beach water facilities, I assume they need a CPCN to do so, and I think that was one of the conditions precedent in the contract. I just want to make sure that everybody is clear on that. They do not have a CPCN. That is not part of their existing territory, and I think it's one of the, I had it tabbed as one of the covenants, pre-closing covenants, that they would acquire that from the commission. So
Why don't you
does
ask
that
Ms.
happen, before this 215 is approved, should there be some mention that CPCN needs to be?
Isn't there an existing CPCN for Slaughter Beach?
Yes.
So there is a
Slaughter Beach
CPCN,
is,
and Ms. McDowell, you want to explain that, please?
Yes, Slaughter Beach Water Company owns the CPCN for this service territory. In the acquisition of this, Artesian will be acquiring the CPCN. There is no way that customers could have a choice between opting out, they're hooked to a water system, and the CPCN is already, part of the service territory. And Denmark would not issue them a well permit in that territory. It would be brine water. And so and also if you look at the section of the law, 203CB, it clarifies this service territory being able to be acquired by Artesian.
Thank you, Ms. McDowell. Commissioners, any questions? Ms. Drexler?
I have a question for Mr. Spade. The purchase price is broken down, and Part A says improvements, buildings, and structures. Will there be a building or a structure?
There are 4 pump houses on the property located throughout the development. There's 4 main parcels with some easements that go along with, for mains along. It's a long stretch along the beach. So there are pump houses, pumps, et cetera, that are in those structures. So
Will they
yes.
be replaced or repaired?
It depends. A lot of the structure is in good shape. The mains probably are the most problematic. The biggest problem with Slaughter Beach is no fire protection. And the question with the fire marshal is what sort of protection is required and necessary, and that would turn into, okay, what kind of investment has to be made. So we're working with the fire marshal. The fire company doesn't particularly want that sort of fire protection, doesn't give them the sort of protection they actually look for. They have a bay on either side that they can, utilize and water from. So it really comes down to the fire marshal determining what replacements right now have to be done. But the mains are older. They are 2-inch. A lot of it's cast iron. The pumps are in amazingly good shape. I mean, the guy has really done a yeoman's job of keeping the structures in good shape, and the town appreciates his efforts over the years. We are meeting with the town tomorrow night. As a matter of fact, we've already signed an agreement with the town for further, as they build throughout the town, that will be the water provider if they expand, and they're passing ordinance as well to that effect. So we already begun discussing further actions in the town to improve the system. But I'm not going to say the gentleman didn't provide ample service. He did. He was doing a good job for the system that it was. We think we can bring, more to the system and more reliability. But down the road, there'll be replacements, sure.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I move that the commission adopt order number 9201 as submitted.
And I second.
Is there any discussion on the motion to approve proposed order 9201? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Number 4 is in the matter of the adoption of rules and regulations to implement the provisions of Title 26, Delaware Chapter 10, relating to the creation of a competitive market for retail electricity supplies service, otherwise known as Regulation Docket 49, which has been with us for a period of time. Ms. Orr?
Good afternoon again. Thank you, first of all, to the commission and staff for agreeing to place this item on today's agenda on such short notice, and to Mr. Hartigan for his filing assistance last week. If I could just explain how we got here. On February 2nd, 2017, this commission approved amendments to the electric supplier regulations, which became effective April 11th, 2017. These amendments included revisions to 26 Delaware Administrative Code, Chapter 3001, Section 4, titled Enrollments and Drops Accelerated Switching. Section 4.8 provided that the provisions of Section 4 be implemented on or before September 30th, 2017, but that an EDC may request a waiver to extend that date for an amount of time deemed reasonable by the Commission. Delmarva Power requested and was granted a waiver of the September 30th, 2017 due date with respect to a small subset of Delmarva Power customers, because Delmarva Power was in the process of building the complex functionality within its billing system to support these customer segments in Maryland, and the risk of system problems and billing errors for this subset of customers would have increased if conversion and testing of both Maryland and Delaware customers was attempted at the same time. The waiver extended the deadline to March 31st, 2018, which of course is coming up at the end of this week. We just learned last week from our programming group that despite exercising diligence to meet the March 31st deadline, for reasons set forth in the application, an additional month is needed to ensure that the subset of customers subject to the waiver will not be negatively impacted by billing errors. The other parties in this docket, Commission staff, DPA, and RESA, were notified of this request, and none expressed any opposition. Accordingly, Delmarva Power respectfully requests the Commission enter proposed order number 9202, extending the waiver to May 1st, 2018. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Orr. Mr. Walsh?
Thank you, Chair Winslow and Commissioners. Staff does support the entry of the order for the extension of 30 days.
Thank you. Ms. Iori?
Thank you, Chair Winslow. The DPA does not oppose Delmarva's request.
Okay. Commissioners, any questions?
I move that we approve order number 9202. as
Second
presented.
the motion?
Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Or any abstentions? There are none, the motion carries.
Thank you.
The next matter will be number 5, which is number 2 on the consent agenda. I guess Ms. Orr is here for that. Your questions, Commissioner Gray?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one second. very much. As I look through this information on the tariff that's projected for May, at least it appeared to me that the May projection appears to be the highest monthly increase since the program inception at 59%. I went through some of the numbers, and I was curious if someone could explain to me what the nearly $845,000 true-up posting that seems to have driven the tariff to this level.
I will do my best with that. I am actually covering this matter today for Todd Goodman, who's on vacation. So he did give me a write-up of this issue. So I'll let you know what he had to say about it, and hopefully that answers your question. The QFCP legislation and tariff have a strict monthly rate calculation that must be followed. To summarize that calculation, there is a set payment to the QFCP to which the cost of natural gas is added, and then the revenues the QFCP receives for sales of electricity to PJM is deducted. An unusually cold weather event, which was referred to as a bomb cyclone, ran from about the last week of December through about a week and a half into January. There were days during the bomb cyclone event when natural gas that has recently been in the low $3 to $4 range was in the $120 plus range. As such, the gas cost for the QFCP sites was about $3 million for January, which is almost $2 million higher than forecasted. The offsetting PJM generation revenue received by the QFCP, which offsets the cost of the monthly rate to customers, was about $700,000 higher than forecasted, but it was not enough to offset the spike in the cost of natural gas during the extreme cold event. It is expected to be a single-month event, and the rate should come back down to within the annual cycle.
Thank you for that explanation. I'm not sure that I referenced the same information you do, but it looked like the Henry Hub gas prices, if that's what I'm referencing, have spiked higher in the past from November to December in the year 2016, yet it only culminated in a 42% increase in the QFCP. Whereas in this case, gas prices appear to have gone up 37%, and you've got a spike of 59%. So it could be our reference for gas pricing is coming from a different place, and it could be that I could benefit better by having an opportunity to sit with either someone on staff and get a little bit more educated as to how this tariff is put together. But it just seems to me that that spike is quite extreme. With that, Mr. Chair, I have no further questions.
I think I might be able to help if Delmarva's council doesn't mind if I
Please.
a little bit. Commissioner Bragg, would you like for me to try to answer this? Actually, the Bloom takes their gas from Transco Zone 6, and Transco Zone 6 is an additive to the Henry Hub. So that's why the Henry Hub wouldn't have gone up as much as Transco Zone 6. That's a more constrained zone. And what happened during this bomb cyclone, Greystone, or whatever they called that time period, is those prices escalated even more. So, and the other factor that impacts this rate, why this rate went up, is because April billing determinants, April being a shoulder month, the billing determinants weren't as great as a higher month, such as a winter month, winter heating month, or a summer cooling month. So therefore, that's why the rate was impacted even more. Those couple variables hurt that.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Mr. Chair, thanks for the opportunity to raise questions with regard to this. I think this is still a critically important tariff to track on behalf of the consumer. With that, I'll move that the Commission adopt the tariff as submitted.
I second it.
Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Are there any opposed or any abstentions? The motion carries. There's nothing on the hearing schedule, and we do have Mr. Howlett, some director's comments.
Chairman Winslow, Commissioners, certainly appreciate. I don't know if there were any public comment that anybody wished to make at the meeting, but if there was, why, they should certainly come forward and make that public comment. I would like to let the Commission know that we have been very busy at the FERC level And Mr. DeLosa, who I hope is still here, wanted to share with you some insights into some actions that we have taken with respect to FERC issues.
Thank you, Mr. Howitt. Good afternoon, Chairman and Commissioners. I'm looking forward today to updating you on two different FERC items. The first is a 206 filing on fast start pricing, and the second is a show cause order on supplemental transmission planning. So we'll start from the beginning. So the fast start pricing initiative at FERC started in docket number EL 1834, and in this particular instance, I've been working under the authority granted to staff by the Commission on October 17th, 2017, which, if you'll recall, included opposition to broad-based energy inflation policies with respect to raising the energy market price. And instead, the Commission directed staff to support specific individualized products required for operational performance in lieu of these broad-based policies. So we took to this docket with that particular direction in mind. And essentially, we opposed fast start pricing. And we took a couple different forms so that we could cover all of our bases without duplicating any work. So what is fast start pricing? So it is essentially an argument about the time period over which costs can be considered marginal in the energy market. As I'm sure you know, the costs are set by LMP, which stands for locational marginal pricing. And the question in fast start pricing and an energy market price formation generally is, how long are we talking about when we talk about marginal costs? Are we talking about, as Commissioner Correa asked in the past, the next 1 megawatt? Are we talking about resources that can come online within an hour, resources that come online within 2 hours, or all 24 hours of the day? And the key to this concept is the longer the time that we allow the definition of marginal to entail, the longer the time, the more costs can be included, and so the higher the price in total, right? So today in the market, the definition of marginal is short. As I explained to Commissioner Correa a couple months ago, it is the price for the next single megawatt of electricity. There are disagreements among even the best economists in the energy markets about what should comprise marginal costs. For instance, the PJM IMM and the California IMM are on one side, on the side of the Commission and staff, that says marginal costs should be short. They should be short-run marginal costs. And on the other side is a fair number of generators, and the New York Independent Market Monitor, as well as the MISO Independent Market Monitor. So the question is essentially, why should the Commission care? So if you look at the comments I left on your desk this morning, there is essentially a graph in the Delaware Commission comments, and I'll talk through it for the Commission. What fast start pricing does, in its simplest form, is it keeps the dispatch of the system exactly the same, and it raises the price of that dispatch. When that occurs, a couple things happen to the market. The first is that the total surplus allocation between consumers and producers shifts so that suppliers get more of the existing surplus in the market than customers do. The second effect is that there is no longer a link between the LMP market prices and the signal for the marginal resource to generate. There's a break in that link. Today, LMP signals where generators should dispatch based on the marginal price. When you take that marginal price and you raise it above the short-run marginal cost, there need to be other new side payments in the market in order to dispatch generation that would have been dispatched based on LMP. And the net effect of this is higher prices. It's all explained in specifically our comments, but also several of the other sets of comments that we filed in this matter. Now, we thought that several different aspects of this proceeding needed to be commented on. And so to effectuate that, we signed on to several different sets of comments in order to make all the points that we thought needed to be made in this particular instance. So first, we wanted to oppose the breakage between short-run marginal cost and LMP. So we did that through our comments on which no one else joined us. We made very similar arguments to the IMM. We incorporated the chart that I referred to as actually an IMM chart that they used in explaining this very concept to the PJM stakeholder process. We pointed out that fast start pricing is not conducive to well-functioning market. This commission has advised staff on multiple occasions that we agree and that we approve of markets. We look for short-run marginal costs to maximize the surplus that comes out of the market, and that's what we addressed in our comment. In the second set of comments we signed on to was essentially an alternate pleading. So if FERC does not agree with what we file in our comments, we wanted to limit the essentially amount of time that marginal could be to 1 hour. And on those sets of comments, we joined American Municipal Power, the DPA, NRDC, as well as the PJM Industrial Customer Coalition and Nextera, and a couple others. And then on the third brief, to kind of comport with the Commission's last direction, we, on another brief with the DEDPA and the District of Columbia Office of People's Counsel, we advocated for market-friendly, specific reforms that I'd be more than happy to explain to the Commission if you like, that we think may offer the FERC an alternate path forward that would kind of preserve competitive markets and also achieve some of the goals that they were after in the first instance in this proceeding. So with that, I'll pause on fast start pricing and ask if the Commission has any questions. And if not, I would be looking for ratification for our actions in this docket.
Thank you, Joe. Anybody have any questions or comments? Good work, and I certainly support your request, and can we have a motion, I guess, to ratify the good work that staff has done in this area? Build upon the great work of Mr. John Farber, who's in the audience back there. Hi, John.
And under the great leadership of Robert Howard. Also move.
Correct.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I second.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries.
Thank you, Chairman.
Number two.
And in lieu of standing in between the wonderful cake provided by Mr. Smith, I'll keep this one short. This next proceeding actually relates to supplemental transmission projects, and our esteemed Mr. Farber has filed in this docket on behalf of this commission on November 21, 2016. Essentially, what this proceeding relates to is supplemental transmission planning. And what that means is there is a category of transmission projects that goes through the PJM Regional Transmission Expansion Plan process that is not subject to any filed criteria review. PJM, FERC, and the transmission owners file several sets of reliability criteria with various entities, and any project that comes out of those requirements is called a baseline project. There are a certain set of rules that apply to those projects. This matter is for those other set of projects for which essentially transmission owners have discretion to say there is an unsafe or unreasonable issue on whatever line, and so we will develop a supplemental project in order to alleviate this concern. And so the FERC initiated a show cause order in 2016 in order to look into how these projects are planned and what essentially the net effect of the planning process is. And so in line with our comments, the commission found that the way that the transmission owners were implementing supplemental projects did not comply with FERC precedent, specifically Order 890. And what the commission required is they required the transmission owners essentially to open the process up to stakeholders to a larger degree than otherwise had been performed, I suppose. So they required an additional meeting as well as time for stakeholders to submit comments to the transmission owners on any particular issues that they would have with any of these supplemental projects. Unfortunately, they did not clarify the dispute resolution process by which if a stakeholder has a problem with any of these projects, that dispute can actually be resolved by some neutral arbiter. The dispute resolution processes remained in Schedule 5 of the operating agreement, and so we may be looking ahead to some of those dispute resolution processes, but none of that, and staff is requesting no action of the commission today. Just wanted to provide you that update and make you aware that staff and the DPA, Ruth Bryce is not here, but we will remain vigilant for any of these supplemental projects that continue to get planned and cost assigned to Delaware ratepayers. So, with
Thank
any
you.
questions?
Any questions? Looks like there's none.
Mr. Delosa, thank you very much. Appreciate your constant monitoring. Has John been sending you any information at all since he left, or?
Not too much, Mr. Howard. Enjoy your retirement, please. You've earned it.
Thank you, Joe. I would like to point out that April is Safe Dig Month. So when your significant other or your spouse hands you a shovel and sends you out into the yard, I want you to know that it requires Miss Utility at least 3 days of notification so that they can mark the area. You wouldn't want to dig unsafely, so if you need an excuse not to just take the shovel and go out in the yard and start digging, be sure and call Miss Utility, dial 811 and wait 3 more days, and maybe the effort will pass. Just fair warning as to some of the things you may have to do. I would like to point out that our next commission meeting is on Thursday, April the 12th, and I don't care. And not only that, I wish everybody a happy April Fool's Day next Sunday, this coming Sunday. Thank you, Chairman Winslow, Commissioners.
Thank you, Mr. Howitt. We're going to have a little bit of a gathering here after the meeting to celebrate Bob's time with us, but I just want to make a couple of personal comments, and that is that I have very much enjoyed my 5 years with Bob. There have been occasions when I've lost it, and he's had to bring me down from the clouds and hold me by my belt and talk to me and get me back in the right direction. So for all those occasions, Bob, I want to thank you, and for all your advice and assistance. This commission is much appreciative. You've done a good job, and you have a lot of predecessors who did good jobs too, so you stand right in there with them, and I don't know if I saw Mr. O'Brien here. He's one of our previous executive directors. I don't think Bruce Percat is here right now. But Bob, thank you so much for all you've done. And any commissioners, anybody like to make any comments? I do. Any comments? I think that Bob is very proactive. He knew he was going to retire, so what he did was he went out to look in the community to see what activities he might engage himself in. It just so happened that he tried out for a group at a local senior center, and I was able to capture the video on that, and Bob is on the right-hand side of this video as you see it. Is it ready to run? Connie, are they back there in the back? Can they run that video? Is this it? Here it comes right now. I think there might be Bob coming out right now. Come on out. Bob, come on out, Bob. Okay. It's going to be okay, Bob.